Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really digging into something pretty major, a pivotal moment in American governance that sent ripples from Washington, D.C. out across the whole country.
That's right. We're talking about just days ago, August 11th, 2025, when President Trump's administration, essentially initiated a federal takeover of the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department.
And this wasn't just, shuffling papers. It had immediate real-world consequences right off the bat.
Absolutely. One of the biggest things right away was D.C.'s sanctuary city protections.
Wow.
Gone, rescinded immediately.
And to make it clear who was running the show, DEA Administrator Terry Cole was put in charge as the emergency police commissioner.
Yeah, basically taking power away from the existing chief, Pamela Smith. But like you said, this isn't just a D.C. story.
Not at all. At the exact same time, the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi, she sent out these demand letters.
Right, to mayors and governors, 32 mayors, several governors in other sanctuary cities and states.
And the message was crystal clear. You've got 1 week. 1 week to show you're following federal immigration law, or else the Department of Justice is coming after you with lawsuits.
And we saw that new approach instantly in D.C. that first night, 45 arrests, part of this new crime crackdown.
Including, interestingly, 29 people identified as illegal immigrants. It really feels like a direct challenge to local governments and a very, very firm federal stance on immigration and crime.
So yeah, today we're diving into this seismic shift in federal power as the U.S. Attorney General puts America's sanctuary cities on notice and takes direct control of the nation's capital.
Our mission here is to unpack these really bold moves. We want to look at the crime situations in D.C. that led up to this, explore what it means for other cities and states, across the map.
And connect it all back to the bigger picture, the priorities of the Trump administration. The idea is for you, listening, to get a real handle on what this means for, the balance of power and maybe even daily life.
Okay, so let's start with that context. What did crime actually look like in D.C. right before this federal intervention happened?
Well, President Trump used some incredibly strong words. He described D.C. as overrun by violent gangs and bloodthirsty criminals, roving mobs of wild youth, drugged-out maniacs, and homeless people. Really intense language.
And he didn't just leave it there, did he? He pointed to specific, awful examples from just the last few months.
That's right. 2 embassy staffers murdered back in May, a congressional intern shot and killed in June, and then an administration staffer who was, quote, mercilessly beaten just days before the takeover.
And the statistics, they seem to back up the idea that there was a serious problem.
They do paint a grim picture. D.C.'s homicide rate in 2024, 27.54 per 100,000 people. That's actually higher than any of the 50 states.
Wow, higher than any state. And what about other crimes?
Vehicle theft was another huge one. The rate was 842.4 thefts per 100,000 residents.
Okay, 842. How does that compare nationally?
It's more than 3 times the national average, which sits around 250, so a massive difference.
And one thing that often gets brought up in this context is the city's bail system, right?
Exactly, the no-cash bail system. The president's criticism was pretty direct. Somebody murders somebody, and they're out on no-cash bail before the day is out. That was his take.
Beyond bail, there were also issues of prosecution, weren't there?
Yeah, there was data suggesting that nearly 70% of criminals arrested in D.C. back in 2022 were never prosecuted. 70%.
That's a huge number. And then there were those allegations about crime stats being altered.
Right. Reports of a D.C. police commander being suspended for allegedly forging crime statistics. That obviously doesn't help public trust or give a clear picture of safety.
So you add all that up, the stats, the specific incidents, the prosecution rates, and you can see how the administration built its case for stepping in. Some sources even place D.C. among the top 20% most dangerous cities globally.
That was the justification presented, yeah. A dire situation requiring drastic action.
Okay, so given that backdrop, how exactly did the federal government make this move? What were the mechanics of it?
Well, President Trump used a specific part of the law, Section 740 of the D.C. Self-Government Act. He invoked that to declare a public safety emergency.
And that declaration triggered what?
It immediately brought in 800 National Guard troops. And the mechanism was there to bring in more if they felt it was needed.
And Attorney General Bondi, she was pretty blunt about the goal.
Very blunt. She said, no more crime rampant in our beautiful capital. No more teenage girls beating a disabled man to death. No more drive-bys. Just a very stark statement of intent.
So what were her first concrete actions then under this emergency declaration?
Incredibly swift. First, she rescinded D.C.'s illegal immigration protections, just like that.
Okay.
Then she removed Chief Pamela Smith from power and installed DDA Administrator Terry Cole as the emergency commissioner, giving him full authority.
And she specifically targeted some existing police orders, too.
Yes, crucially. She revoked 3 specific MPD Metropolitan Police Department orders from 2023 and 2024.
What did those orders do?
They basically limited how much D.C. police could cooperate with federal immigration authorities. Like, they couldn't ask about immigration status or make arrests just because there was a federal immigration warrant.
So getting rid of those was a major policy reversal.
A complete reversal, signaling a totally different approach to immigration enforcement at the local level, now directed federally.
And like we mentioned, the results were immediate. 45 arrests that first night, 29 identified as illegal immigrants. So this is a huge move. How did people in D.C. react?
It was definitely mixed. On one hand, you had the D.C. Police Union president coming out in support.
What did he say?
He said, "We completely agree with the president that the crime in the District of Columbia is out of control and something needs to be done." So, clear backing there.
But not everyone agreed, obviously.
No, definitely not. D.C.'s own Attorney General, Brian Schwab, he strongly opposed it, called the administration's actions unprecedented, unnecessary, and unlawful. Strong words.
And we also heard from U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro.
Right. She's been critical of D.C.'s justice system before. She made comments suggesting it was too lenient, mentioning things like yoga and arts and crafts for violent criminals instead of, tougher consequences.
It's interesting, too, that this wasn't totally out of the blue in terms of political sentiment, right? Didn't the House already vote on D.C.'s sanctuary status?
That's a good point. The GOP-led House had actually passed a bill earlier to end D.C.'s sanctuary city statutes.
And did that pass easily?
The vote was 224 to 194. And notably, 11 Democrats actually crossed the aisle to support it. So there was already some bipartisan support, or at least cross-party support, in Congress for tightening things up in D.C. before the president acted.
Okay, this is where it gets, I think, really interesting, because the D.C. takeover, as big as it is, it's not happening in a vacuum. It seems like part of a much bigger strategy targeting sanctuary cities nationwide.
Exactly. It's the other major piece of this puzzle. Now, for listeners, sanctuary policies basically are when local governments decide to limit how much they help federal immigration enforcement.
And the argument against them, the one the administration is pushing, is that these policies can be dangerous, right?
Oh, yeah.
They often point to specific cases.
They do. The Lake and Riley case is one frequently brought up. The claim is that the person accused of her murder had been arrested previously in New York City, but was released because of its sanctuary policies, before later allegedly committing the crime in Georgia. That narrative fuels the push against these local policies.
So how is Attorney General Bondi tackling this on a national level? What are these demand letters about?
She sent official letters, as we said, to 32 mayors and several governors identified as leading sanctuary jurisdictions. And the message was an ultimatum.
Which was?
Respond within 1 week, confirm you're complying with federal law, and tell exactly what you're doing to get rid of any policies that block federal immigration enforcement.
And if they don't?
She was very clear. Because if you aren't, we're going to come after you. She explicitly threatened lawsuits.
So come into compliance or face the DOJ in court.
Pretty much. Her quote was, "Any sanctuary jurisdiction that continues to put illegal aliens ahead of American citizens can either come to the table or see us in court." Very confrontational language.
And she even singled out California, didn't she? With a warning to the governor.
Yes, the letter to Governor Gavin Newsom had a particularly sharp warning. It said that individuals, like officials acting under the color of law, who obstruct federal immigration enforcement or help with illegal immigration, well, they might face criminal charges themselves.
Wow, criminal charges against state or local officials. That really ups the ante.
It absolutely does. It suggests potential personal liability, not just institutional lawsuits. And the DOJ, they've put out a list nearly 36 cities, states, counties, mostly seen as blue-leaning, that they consider sanctuary jurisdictions.
So how are these cities and states responding to this pressure? Are they complying?
The responses are coming in, and they're quite varied. Rochester, New York, for example, basically shrugged it off.
What did they say?
They said, nothing in Attorney General Bondi's letter is new, and none of it has legal merit. They even pointed to past lawsuits against Chicago that were dismissed, so defiance there.
What about somewhere like Seattle?
Seattle's mayor, Bruce Harrell, said he strongly disagreed with its assertions. His point was that immigration is a federal job and Seattle's laws protect residents while still, in his view, being compliant.
And New York City. Mayor Adams is sometimes seen as aligning with Trump on certain issues.
That's an interesting one. Adams did express support for NYC's local laws, but he also urged the city council to maybe re-examine them.
Right.
To, quote, effectively work with the federal government to keep violent criminals off our streets. So it sounds like he's feeling the pressure, maybe trying to find some middle ground.
Meanwhile, Bondi is highlighting places that do cooperate, right, like South Carolina.
Exactly. She pointed to South Carolina under Attorney General Alan Wilson as a positive example, a model of cooperation between federal, state, and local law enforcement.
And she cited specific results from that cooperation.
Yes. Mentioned busting a Sinaloa cartel member and seizing a lot of cocaine down in Myrtle Beach, and also highlighted a huge fentanyl bust.
How big was that?
It was the largest in South Carolina's history, apparently. 156 pounds of fentanyl seized.
156 pounds. How much is that in terms of, like, potential harm?
The estimate was staggering. A street value of $1.7 million, but enough lethal doses to potentially kill 36 million people. 2 brothers from California were arrested in that case.
So the administration is clearly using these success stories to contrast with the sanctuary jurisdictions.
Definitely. Showing what they see as the positive results of cooperation versus the alleged dangers of non-cooperation. But it's also important to remember this isn't the first time the DOJ has tangled with states over this.
Right. There have been lawsuits before.
Yeah, states like California, New York, Colorado, Illinois. They've faced DOJ lawsuits over immigration policies in the past. Sometimes the DOJ wins, sometimes it loses. Like in Illinois, a federal judge actually threw out the lawsuit, saying the state's policies were constitutional. So the legal ground here is still contested.
Okay, so we have the D.C. takeover and the nationwide sanctuary city crackdown. That's a very clear focus on crime and immigration enforcement. But to really get the full picture of this administration's goals, we should probably look at the broader priorities outlined by the Attorney General, right?
Absolutely. There was that June 11th memo from Brett Shumit outlining the enforcement priorities for the Justice Department's Civil Division under AG Bondi. And it goes way beyond just crime and immigration.
What kind of things does it cover?
Well, it signals a very proactive, almost activist legal agenda, using federal power to push certain social and cultural policies.
Okay, like what? Give us an example.
One major area is labeled combating discriminatory practices and policies. Now, part of that is standard civil rights enforcement, but it also explicitly targets, quote, illegal private sector DEI preferences, mandates, policies, programs, and activities.
So going after diversity, equity, and inclusion programs.
Yes, through litigation. Even suggesting using the False Claims Act against places getting federal money if their DEI programs are seen as violating civil rights laws, presumably meaning reverse discrimination.
Interesting. What else stood out in that memo?
Another big one is ending anti-Semitism. This involves using legal tools against anti-Semitic harassment and violence, but also setting up a specific task force, Joint Task Force October 7, or JTF 10-7.
What's the goal of that task force?
Twofold, it seems, seeking justice for the victims of the October 7th attack in Israel and also fighting anti-Semitism here in the U.S.
Okay. What other priorities were listed?
A third really significant one is titled Protecting Women and Children, and the memo starts that section by explicitly stating the recognition of only 2 sexes, male and female.
And how does that translate into enforcement priorities?
It focuses on investigating and taking action against those seen as misleading the public about, quote, chemical and surgical mutilation, which refers to certain gender transition procedures for minors.
How do they do that?
By looking into potential violations of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act by drug companies or online pharmacies involved, and also by pursuing False Claims Act cases against healthcare providers.
How so?
If providers bill federal programs like Medicaid for services related to what the memo calls radical gender experimentation, especially if they allegedly use false diagnosis codes to get around state bans on those procedures.
So using federal funding rules to enforce a specific view on gender transition.
That appears to be the strategy, yes. And one more major priority mentioned was prioritizing denaturalization.
Meaning?
Stepping up efforts to strip U.S. citizenship from people who obtained it illegally.
Who are they focusing on?
The memo lists several categories: national security threats, people involved in war crimes or human rights abuses, gang members, those with undisclosed felonies, human traffickers, sex offenders, violent criminals, and people involved in various types of fraud.
So, taken together, these priorities suggest the DOJ under Bondi sees its role as much broader than just prosecuting typical federal crimes.
Much broader. It's about actively using federal legal power to shape policy and potentially social norms in areas like diversity, anti-Semitism, gender identity, and immigration status.
Now, alongside these policy priorities, there have been some controversies, or at least questions raised, about some of the administration's claims and data, haven't there? Like with fentanyl seizures.
Yes, that's been a point of scrutiny. AG Bondi made claims about the number of lives saved due to fentanyl seizures in the administration's first 100 days. The numbers she cited escalated dramatically.
How much did they escalate?
Well, figures went from saving 21 million lives to 119 million, and then even up to 258 million lives saved from seizing 3,400 kilos.
258 million lives. How did people react to that?
With a lot of skepticism, especially when you consider that the total number of fentanyl deaths in the U.S. annually is around 70,000. The math just didn't seem to add up for many observers.
So it raises questions about the reliability or perhaps the communication of statistics.
It does. It highlights a tension we sometimes see between, strong public pronouncements and the underlying verifiable data. It leaves you, the listener, kind of having to weigh these competing claims.
And then there was the whole situation with the Epstein files.
Right.
That also caused a stir.
A significant stir, yes. AG Bondi initially announced very publicly that a list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients was, quote, sitting on my desk right now to review, and that this was a directive from President Trump.
But was there such a list?
Well, subsequently, both the DOJ and the FBI stated that there was actually no evidence that a specific client list like that existed.
And didn't she also make claims about videos?
She did. She claimed there were tens of thousands of videos of Epstein with children or involving child pornography. But FBI Director Kash Patel later seemed to walk that claim back, suggesting the evidence wasn't quite what was initially portrayed.
And the Wall Street Journal had a report about Trump's name being mentioned.
Yes, they reported that Bondi had informed President Trump back in May that his name was included somewhere within the Epstein-related documents that were being reviewed.
Yet, despite these apparent contradictions or walkback claims, the president supported her.
He did. President Trump publicly defended Bondi, saying she was doing a fantastic job. So it creates this dynamic where there are public controversies and questions about accuracy, but also strong backing from the top.
And just one more recent action to mention, the bounty on Nicolas Maduro.
Right. AG Bondi announced they were increasing the reward for information, leading to the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to $50 million.
And the justification.
Accusing him of working with terrorist groups she named Tren de Aragua, the Sinaloa Cartel of the Suns, to bring violence into the United States, again showing a very assertive, confrontational stance internationally this time.
So if we zoom out now and look at the bigger picture, Pam Bondi as AG, these enforcement priorities, the controversies, it seems to fit into a larger pattern with this administration's appointments, doesn't it?
It really does seem to. Critics often point out that many of the cabinet and senior staff selections appear to prioritize blind loyalty to President Trump above other traditional qualifications.
Who were some of the other names often mentioned in that context?
Well, you have people like Pete Hegseth, nominated for Defense Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for Health and Human Services, Linda McMahon for Education, Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence, Kristi Noem for Homeland Security.
And then figures like Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy tapped for that new department.
Right, the Department of Government Efficiency. It's a lineup that suggests a specific, perhaps unconventional approach to governing.
And many see this as directly connected to this plan called Project 2025.
Exactly. These appointments seem designed to implement the vision laid out in Project 2025, which is essentially a detailed conservative blueprint, primarily developed by the Heritage Foundation and its allies.
What's the core idea of Project 2025?
Fundamentally, it aims to significantly centralize power within the presidency and restructure the federal government to more efficiently enact a conservative agenda. The goal, as some describe it, is to dismantle government and rebuild it in his own image, his meaning the president's.
We've also seen major developments related to the justice system itself, particularly around presidential immunity.
Yes, that's been huge. Special counsel Jack Smith had to drop the federal cases against Trump, the election subversion and classified documents cases.
Why was that?
Because of that landmark Supreme Court ruling that established certain forms of presidential immunity for official acts.
But the cases aren't gone forever.
No, the dismissal was without prejudice. That means the charges could potentially be refiled once Trump is no longer president and immunity doesn't apply. And importantly, the state-level cases against him, like in Georgia and New York, they're expected to continue because presidential immunity doesn't extend to state charges.
And one last piece of this puzzle regarding staffing the government, the potential use of recess appointments.
Right. There's discussion about the administration planning to use recess appointments quite extensively. This would allow them to install cabinet members and maybe even a Supreme Court justice while the Senate is in recess, bypassing the usual confirmation hearings and votes.
How many positions could that affect?
Potentially up to 1,200 key positions could be filled this way. And a significant point is that these appointments often bypass the standard FBI background checks.
So it's a way to quickly install loyalists into critical roles across the government.
That seems to be the goal, yes. Streamlining the implementation of the administration's agenda by getting preferred people into place quickly, potentially sidestepping Senate opposition and standard vetting. It definitely raises questions about checks and balances.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, there's a lot to think about. Really consider the implications when the federal government starts asserting its power so directly over states and cities on these really sensitive issues, immigration, crime, but also extending into social and cultural areas through those DOJ priorities.
Yeah, how does this shift the whole dynamic, the whole relationship between Washington, D.C. and the rest of the country? What does it mean for local control versus federal authority?
It's a fundamental question about the balance of power in America, and it's something that's clearly unfolding right now, something we'll all be watching in the months and years ahead. What does this future look like? That's the thought to leave you with.